Back in 2005, Six Flags announced that they were closing Six Flags Astroworld in Houston, closing it forever, which meant I had to go visit and do it quick. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode of Park Tales talking about Astroworld, please don't forget to hit that like button, share the video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification so that you can get notified anytime I've got a new video up. When Six Flags announced that they were closing Astroworld, we were living in Florida and my wife and I were both teaching full-time. It was actually one of the few times we actually had a little bit of extra spending money, and it worked out well because I had never been to Astroworld and really wanted to go, especially before it was closing. And so I did a little bit of begging, a little bit of pleading, a little bit of cajoling, a little bit of, honey, I love yous. And sure enough, she actually gave me permission to go. What made it even more fun was I actually joined a couple of other friends of mine from the Florida Coaster Club named George and Joey, and we headed down. Now, George is a computer tech, and Joey was also a ride operator at SeaWorld. At the time, I was working as a ride operator on Rhino Rally at Busch Gardens. So we had a little bit of experience working at parks and knew our parks pretty well, and it definitely played a little bit of a role in our trip. I flew out on a Saturday morning in mid-October, about 2 weeks before the park closed for good. My plan was to arrive in the morning, spend the day at the park, and then fly back home the next morning. I actually made it in time to be there at the opening of the park. It was kind of funny because I pulled up around the park and saw this huge line of cars waiting to get in. I thought it was a little early for the parking lot, so I actually drove around and found another gate that was open that had no line. Drove right in, parked right up by the entrance, and was there before the park even opened. And while we're waiting in that crowd for opening, you got to meet a couple interesting characters, such as this guy. Beads at a park? Okay, it's not New Orleans. The nice thing about being there early is it got us there before the biggest of the crowds arrived. I met George and Joey at the park, and it gave us a great opportunity to catch such classic coasters like the Cyclone. The Cyclone was a wood coaster that was based on the classic Coney Island Cyclone. Same kind of layout, and it was given pretty decent rides early. I'd heard mixed reviews about it, but when we got to ride it first thing, and we were on one of the very first trains of the day, it was actually a pretty decent ride. Now, the poor ride operator who was at the dispatch console, she was actually dodging wasps. Apparently the wasps had built a little nest up over her head, and she was having to duck and dodge and work around and then dive and hit the button to dispatch. Not a great way to start the day. But she was doing a good job, and we had fun on that. We were also able to catch a quick early ride on a coaster called Ultra Twister. Now, Ultra Twister was kind of a unique thing. There were only a couple of them built, and it was the only one in the States. You actually sat in essentially a little pod with the track kind of all around you, and then you would ride in a straight line. It didn't have turns, but it would go up and down. It was a fun ride. It was different. We really enjoyed it. The sad thing is, once the park closed, it was pretty much scrapped, and that was the last we ever saw of Ultra Twister. After those, though, the crowd started coming in pretty quick and in force. It was a busy day. Not only was it a Saturday where they were doing the Halloween stuff, but it was also one of the last weekends for the park, and people were coming in to say goodbye, and boy, did they come in. Lines pretty quickly got fairly long. We still managed to get in almost everything we wanted to, but a lot of the lines, they had what's called an SLC, a suspended looping coaster, and it had over a 90-minute wait. I pretty much almost never wait 90 minutes for anything, and I certainly wasn't going to do it for that. But everything else we managed to get in. But as I was reading my little diary report of that day, what really apparently stood out to me back then was the operations of the employees. Over at Cyclone, you had that poor girl that was working so hard around the wasps. Most of the employees did a really good job, especially knowing their jobs were going to be gone in a couple weeks, trying to make it as fun as possible. The opening ceremony, the employees came out and they did this little song and dance routine and greeted everybody, and it was kind of a nice little surprise. Most of the employees were working really hard, and I was impressed because At the time, Six Flags Astroworld and the roller coaster enthusiast community didn't have a great reputation about its employees. In fact, it had a pretty dreadful one. And so we weren't expecting much from that, and especially with 2 weeks left to go, if they messed around and got fired, so what? They were out of a job anyways. But most of them tried really hard, and we were really impressed. But the ones that did have issues, boy, did they have some issues. As an example, we were getting ready to ride Accelerate. Accelerate was a coaster where the track was up on top of the car, and you were sitting in a fully enclosed car, and the cars could swing while you were going down, and it had forwards cars and backwards cars. Well, as me and Joey get into the ride, we're sitting there, and the girl on the platform that's up near the front of the train is just absolutely clueless. Has no idea what's going on, not paying any attention, because she's sitting there with a bunch of CDs in her hand. Ooh, should we play this? Should we play that? Oh, nothing going on in her head except the CDs. Can we say accident waiting to happen? Because if something had happened, she wouldn't have seen it. Thankfully, nothing happened, but what was really shocking for us was Joey and I got into the train, we sat down, pulled down our restraints, and she decided, oh, maybe she needed to hand the CDs back to the guy on the other side, since she had picked one, and actually handed them to us and had Joey pass them back over to her. And Joey and I kind of looked at each other as ride operators and went, that wouldn't fly where we were from. Let's just say it really left us kind of dumbfounded. It wasn't the only time during the day we were dumbfounded by a couple things that the ride operators did. Another example is over at Grease Lightning. Grease Lightning was a shuttle loop coaster. It would actually launch you up to about 50-55 miles an hour into this loop that would go up. You go up a spike, and then you come back down the spike, through the loop backwards, up another spike, and then stop. Fun, awesome roller coaster. And the ride operators were kicking tail. They had a long line, really long line, and they were moving that coaster and getting people through. I was really impressed. What threw me off here was the couple of the guests. There was a family in front of us, two parents, and they had, it looked like a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old, and then they had their kid in the stroller. Strollers don't go in lines. Don't take your kid in a stroller through a line for a ride. It doesn't work. Narrow, the stroller's barely fitting. They're insisting on pushing this thing through anyways. And we're kind of looking at each other going, this isn't going to go well. We get up to the station, and this family decides to get on the ride. Well, the two older kids, they don't want to ride. They're not liking this. It looks scary. It looks terrifying. It makes noise. Not going to happen. So they walk across the train and stand over on the other side. Oldest one's crying. The middle one looks scared. Meanwhile, they still got the littlest one in the stroller. Well, Mom and Dad proceed to leave the stroller right next to the gate, next to the moving train, and get into the train and get ready to go. With kid and stroller on one side of the train, other two kids on the other side, and nothing between them. And the ride operators are looking at this going, what? This doesn't work. If the kid in the stroller had reached out, they could have hit the train, and when that train launched, can we say big injury? Not going to happen. And so the ride operator's kind of looking at him going, what are you doing? Finally decides, after getting a bunch of nothing out of this family, she tells them, okay, get up. Can you move the stroller? No, we're leaving the stroller. And the family's just being dumb. So she tells them to get up, stand on the side. And the poor operator picks up the stroller, walks through the train holding the kid in the stroller, sets it down on the other side, and then tells the two kids to take the stroller and go stand over at the exit ramp out of the way. And then lets the parents back on. Joey and I, in particular, were a little bit shocked. We were cheering the operator on. Good for you, because these people are stupid trying to risk their kids like that. But at the same time, we're thinking, you know what? There's the liability issue of picking up the kid in the stroller. There's the liability issue of walking them through the train that way. All of which should have been done by the parents, and the stroller never should have been brought in. And we're thinking, good for the operator, but at the same time, that we're happy it wasn't us having a situation like that in our job, because it could have gotten us fired. But again, it's 2 weeks left, so what? Moral of that story, leave your kids' strollers at the stroller parking area, walk them through, and make sure they wait over at the exit area instead of on the platform. You'll save everybody time and frustration. Probably the most confounding one of the day, though, was one that happened over at a roller coaster called the Viper. Viper was an older roller coaster, a great ride, built by a guy named Anton Schwarzkopf, who built some of the first looping coasters. Fun, great rides. I've been on one similar. I was really looking forward to it. Sometimes older coasters run into some interesting things, and this one had a ride just a few cycles before us where the coaster, as it was finishing the route, it hit the end brake run, and the brakes actually grabbed too hard and stopped the train before the station. Well, not only did it stop before the station, but it actually stopped before the guide wheels that would help pull the car and train into the station, which meant it was stuck. It wasn't going anywhere. Well, this is going to be interesting to see what they do. And we're figuring, being ride operators, that means that they're going to have to do what's called a lockout, because you can't get to the car without going into the ride area. It's called a safety perimeter. And you're not allowed in that area unless you shut the ride down and lock it down so it can't be restarted to make sure it doesn't move and hurt somebody. They don't lock out. Two of the ride operators immediately jump off the platform and walk right back to the roller coaster. It's not on a loading platform. There's no exit platforms or anything. They're actually in the basic track area. They start talking to the guests, explaining what's going on, which, like I said, they're in a safety zone, which is kind of scary. Maintenance gets there actually pretty quick. I was surprised. The maintenance guy then walks over, and he also jumps right down into the track area. Looks over it, walks over, releases the brakes. Again, all of this while the engines and everything are not shut down. Nobody's locked out. There's no safety procedure that's happened here. He unlocks the brakes, and then he and one of the ride-ops actually climb on top of the track behind the train and begin to push. Oh my goodness. Without it being locked out. Here's the problem. If that train moves the wrong way, it's running them over, and that's several tons of machinery that will crush and injure or kill them. That's not how it's supposed to be done. They push the train forward until it latches onto the guide wheels that can then pull it the rest of the way into the station. It pulls the train in, they hop off the track, all three of them walk back into the station. They empty the train, send it around on one test run, and reopen it. Joey and I are just kind of looking at each other going, oh my goodness gracious. It may not sound like a big deal. Oh, they know it's not going to roll backwards. Oh, it shouldn't do anything like that. The problem is there are multiple times in histories of theme parks where people have done similar things to this, and the train rolled away that they weren't expecting. And I could mention several of them. Revolution of Magic Mountain had a girl that was killed while she was crossing the tracks in the station. There have been a couple people that have been killed out on tracks because the train moved when they weren't expecting it to move. It's a very highly dangerous situation. And they look like they've been doing this all the time. It was shocking to me. Thankfully, those were the rare exceptions to the park. For the most part, we had a ball. We enjoyed most of the park, loved several of the coasters. Had one of the worst rides on a coaster I've ever been on a ride that was called Batman the Escape, which was one of the very first stand-up roller coasters in the United States, and it beat the snot out of me. So I didn't mind that one disappearing at all. But there were several rides there, like Viper, that would have been nice to see them get moved to another park and taken care of. And sadly, I think pretty much all of Astroworld was gone. It had some great theming, and it looked like it was a wonderful park at one point. It had just been neglected, left aside, and then Six Flags decided to sell it for a parking lot. Sadly, it's still just an empty lot. Houston lost a great park and gained absolutely nothing. And that's just tragic. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this little look back at my one trip to Astroworld and some of the interesting things that were there. It was a great park, and I hate the fact that it's gone. If you did enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button. Hit the share button, too, to share it with your friends and family and other people. Let them see it as well. I'd love to hear your comments, too. If you've been to Astroworld or to another park that's closed and you've got great memories, I'd love to hear yours, too. Make sure you share them in the comments below. Thank you again to my patrons, too. I appreciate them. And thank you for watching.